All right, so it's time to start. Welcome to Guru session number 16 now we're at, where it's all about MIDI. And tonight I just thought we'd start with a little something different. Let me switch screens here and let's try this. All right, I'll interrupt. Yes, I know I was a little soft. I couldn't quite figure out how to get the sound to go perfectly from this. So that was a little something that I whipped up using MIDI, in fact, yeah? And so that's what we're going to dig into. In fact, I was feeding MIDI out of Isadora and back into Isadora, but there's a lot of ways that you can do this. But we're really going to start with the basics tonight because I'm not assuming that anyone necessarily knows a lot about MIDI, and hopefully if you do know about MIDI, it'll still be good to kind of hit some of these topics. So let's just go over the basics, right? The things that we always say here. Number one, if you have a question, make sure and put @, and then type your question and hit return, because it makes a big, bright little yellow thing over there that I can see and I'll notice if you asked a question, right? Also, make sure if you haven't already subscribed to this channel, probably you have, but subscribe to the channel. And if you've got some comments, comments help us. They kind of see the activity in the channel. Do the comments down there. Say something nice. Say something critical, whatever you like to say. Also, all of these are always announced on our social media channels, on Instagram and on Facebook, so sign up for those if you haven't already, right? So there's the boilerplate introduction. I think that covers everything. I'll try and remember to remind you to put @Troikatronics when you ask questions. Now, I want to dig in, and as I said a million times in the chat as we got started, there's a README file because I've asked you all to download some applications, because I'm also not assuming that you necessarily have MIDI hardware. Like today, the only piece of MIDI hardware I have is this one, this nice Korg Nano controller, which we'll be using later. But I didn't actually have a MIDI keyboard, that plays notes, right? So I got a virtual one. And I found one for both Mac and Windows that you can use. And then also, I could have set up a more complicated synthesizer, but I just wanted something simple that all of you would have. So on Mac OS, there's a great thing called Simple Synth. Anyway, these pieces of software are all there for you to download. So please kind of get them as we're setting up here, because everything... Oh. No, it's dead over here too. Yeah. Is it, all right, I have to wait now because of the big delay. I want to see if you're, because on my screen, I see a circle of death. I'm going to refresh my screen. All right, I guess that it's working. I'm sorry for the interruption. Here in Vienna, someone viewing it, it stopped for them. So I'm sorry, we have to sort of back up. Forgive me for the interruption. Let's try again, okay? It's very confusing because I saw the spinning wheel of death and then I heard that it wasn't working. So, all right, here we go. Let's try again from the beginning. So welcome to Guru session number 16 about MIDI. I'm just going to kind of go over it again. So in the README file, there are downloads that you need to download. So please do that right now because you'll need these apps because I'm not assuming that you have any MIDI gear. I only have this little guy, this Korg Nano controller, but I didn't have a MIDI keyboard. So, and I wanted to have software that we all had the same thing so we can go through this and learn about MIDI. So again, just to repeat, we're going to be going through it step by step. So even if you're not an expert with MIDI or you haven't really worked with it before, I think that you're going to get what you need, yeah? And so I'll try to go through it step by step. There's kind of a lot of apps here to mess with. It could get a little complicated. I hope it won't be too difficult, right? We're going to start by just having an introduction to MIDI, and then I'm just going to start going through the features of the program and let you know what's happening, okay? All right. Just because I'm not sure if it got chopped off, I guess you all heard the beginning part, right? About subscribe, join Facebook, join Instagram, you know, make comments, that stuff. Okay, I'm not going to say it again. That's it. All right. So, I just saw that someone said Simple Synth doesn't work on Catalina. Okay, I've thought that I tried that, but if it doesn't, I'm sorry. We'll just have to. We'll just have to see how it goes. All right. So I'm going to go through it with Simple Synth here, and hopefully, if yes. So I'm hearing different stories about Catalina and Simple Synth. Let's just go on, and hopefully it'll work for most of you. If it doesn't work for some of you, we'll try and sort that out on the forum. You can go back and go through the tutorial again and have a look. Yeah? Okay. Here we go. All right. So if you've downloaded Guru 16 MIDI Madness, the Isadora file, you can skip that first part because you're not set up to use it yet. You can just start with black. And I've actually got these frames in here, these slides kind of that say what I'm going to say, but just so that you have a nice document of it. So here we go. Here's a quick introduction to MIDI. So the first thing that you need to know, let me switch to the screen now. Yeah, and I guess I'll just go full screen so that you can see this nice and big, yeah? Okay. So the first thing you need to know about are MIDI ports, right? You're going to see this in Isadora in a second. Sometimes they're called cables because they actually represent like physical cables that we used to use when we use physical cables, which we also still use, right? So when you have different ports, it represents a device or an application that's coming into Isadora or out of it. Say you're sending to that device over the port, right? And to set that up, you can go to the communications item in the main menu and choose MIDI setup, and you'll see this window. You'll see it here in a second. You don't have to necessarily do it right now. So every port is kind of a thing. It's like it could be that Korg Nano controller or another application like Simple Synth or something like that. Okay, so here we go. Now, MIDI channels. Now within each one of these cables, there are 16 MIDI channels. And basically, that allows you, if you can imagine that maybe a synthesizer is so complicated, it doesn't just play one instrument, maybe it plays 10 or 20, I don't know. And so what you can do is set each instrument to a different MIDI channel, right? That's so that you can target and say, I want the bass line to go da-da-da-da-da, and I want the guitar to go dee-dee-dee-dee, like that, right? So each one would have its own MIDI channel so that in a physical device, you might have multiple instruments that are playing. That's why we have 16, right? And again, I always give this example. to get what I mean, it's just like having cable television, right? There's one wire that comes into your house, but on the television you select a channel, channel 4 or channel 6, and then you see what's coming in over that channel. MIDI channels are just the same. There's one cable or port, and there's 16 MIDI channels, and the device that's listening is going to listen to one of those channels, yeah? So that's what MIDI channels are. So we start with a port, and there's 16 MIDI channels inside of that. And then inside of that are messages, right? So on each MIDI channel, there's a variety of MIDI messages that you can send, right? The ones we're going to work with today, I'm not going to try and cover the entire MIDI specification because there's a lot of different messages. But the one that we'll work with today are note on and note off messages. So that's like if you have a musical keyboard and you want to know when did I press the note and when did I let go of that key, right? And the other one is a control change message. It's like on that Korg Nano controller, you've got the knobs and the sliders, so that's what allows you to send those control change messages. So that's the two things we're going to mostly look at today. There's a lot of other ones. There's mono pressure and polyphonic pressure and pitch bend, you know, and all these things that are really related to those musical instruments, but the two most important ones are the ones we'll go over today. So the other thing you need to understand is that you can have virtual MIDI ports, yeah? So here we can have an imaginary wire that goes not actually between two physical devices, but between a computer and between two applications within a computer, right? So in Mac OS, those are built into the applications, and on Windows, you need to download a special piece of software to create a virtual connection. There's a few of them out there, but the one I've recommended that people get today, if you don't have it already, is called Loop MIDI. It's free, it's simple, it does the job, as I said there, and the link is in the session materials, right? Because you'll need that to create one of these virtual connections on Windows, something you won't need to do necessarily on Mac OS. Okay? And then, like I said, just to help you be able to work today in case you don't have MIDI gear. So on Mac OS, we're going to use a virtual keyboard app called MIDI Keys. That's the download link again in the README. And Simple Synth, which I hope is basically working for most people. And that is a thing that is basically a general MIDI synthesizer. That's a standard that's part of MIDI that says that it will play certain instruments it's always able to play, and so Simple Synth implements that. On Windows, I'm suggesting a software called Virtual MIDI Piano Keyboard. You don't need a general MIDI synthesizer for Windows because it's built in. It's called the GS Wavetable Synth. Okay, so that's what we're going to download, and so if hopefully you've got those and can get them open. And we'll be able to use them. If not, like I said, just follow along and we'll try and get that sorted out in the forum. Okay, now here I'm showing how to set up Loop MIDI on Windows. So I'll give you a second to catch up, but let's just watch this video. So I hit the plus button there and it makes a default port called Loop MIDI. That's all you need to do. And then you go to Virtual MIDI Piano Keyboard, and in the Edit menu, you choose MIDI Connections. And then you're going to enable the MIDI input if it's not on already, and then you enable MIDI through on MIDI output, and then you change the output MIDI connection to Loop MIDI, right? So this is going to, so that the keyboard is going to send the notes that it plays into this Loop MIDI virtual port. That's how we're going to get it over to Isadora. Now in Isadora, you go to the MIDI setup. It comes up here in a second, and you'll be able to go there, and what you're going to do is be able to choose Loop MIDI, like now. This is a recording, by the way. I'm not doing this in front of you because I can't run Windows and Mac OS at the same time. So you choose Loop MIDI, and if you have the status window open, which is from the Windows menu, you'll see that you can see the different last message notes changing, little green dot. Or also, if you look at the note on watcher when I play those keys, you'll see that the pitch is changing as I move around there, right? So that's how you set up Loop MIDI, okay? So I know that was kind of quick, But hopefully that process isn't too complicated. Again, I'll just say it one more time. You go to loop MIDI and you hit the plus button to add a MIDI port. Then we go to virtual MIDI piano keyboard, edit MIDI channels or devices, and do that setup to get it sending to loop MIDI. And then you have to tell Isadora to listen to it. Now, you're not going to, in the end, use port 1 for this. You're going to use something else, so you don't necessarily need to do that. But that's that process. So let me just stop right there for a moment and see if anybody has any questions about that, and also give you a moment to try to do that if you're on Windows. On Mac OS, you're not going to have to do any of this because it's already in the system and part of the programs, and we don't have to create this virtual MIDI connection. We'll just have to choose our setup. Yeah. So if you have a question about what I just showed about how to do this on Windows, now is your chance to ask. Make sure to do @Troikatronics and then ask your question so I'll see it. But I think I've gotten through the delay period, so maybe we're okay, and we're just going to continue. Again, if it's not making sense or you can't keep up, then just come back and take a second pass at this tutorial to get going, okay? All right, we're going to go out of full screen now, and I'm going to show you the Windows and me, hopefully in the corner. Let me just check that because I've made a mistake last time. Yes, that's beautiful. All right, so now, well, I will go actually full screen one more time. This is what you need to do to set up for our tutorial today. You've got two different setups. If you should have opened MIDI keys on Mac OS, you should have opened Simple Synth on Mac OS, yeah? And you probably, maybe you don't have a Korg Nano controller, the MIDI controller, the physical one that I'm using. That's okay. Then just leave that off. But you should set up your ports exactly as I've set them up here, because the file that you've got kind of depends on them being set up that way, right? So you want to have, you can just look at them. The main thing is to have MIDI keys as an input on Mac OS on the first port and Simple Synth as the output. You're going to use Isadora Virtual Out on port 2 as both the input and output. I know that's weird, but it'll make sense in a bit. Port 3 has none. And then if you happen to have another like MIDI controller that does control messages, you could put that on port 4. But if you have a Nano controller, even better. But don't worry about that. You'll see how that works as we go along. All right. So I'm going to, and then, on Windows, so we've got the loop MIDI port coming in on port 1. That's going to be our virtual MIDI keyboard because remember, we set it up to send MIDI. The Microsoft GS Wavetable Synth, that's the general MIDI synthesizer, so that's on port 1. We've got loop MIDI as the output on port 2. Port 3 is none, the same as Mac OS. And then the Nano control is on port 4, also the same as Mac OS. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to go back now out of full screen. And so we'll start here. And we've just got this little simple patch that listens for some MIDI to come in. So let me start with my Nano controller and let me make it so that you can see me again. So here. So there's my little Nano controller, right? And I'm just going to move this first slider here. And what I want you to watch, let me put this up here so you can see. Just want you to watch those numbers change. You see there at the bottom where it says control change message, it says channel 1, controller 0, value is changing as I move it up and down. If I go to another controller, right, it's a controller 1, controller 2, controller 3, so the values keep changing. You know, but basically it's telling me here that that's the data I'm getting. So this is a little simple patch, is a way of showing you what's coming into the device, right? A question, if I have a different physical controller, can in and out be named the same? No, you don't. You just choose your physical controller. If you don't have a Nano controller like me, just choose your physical controller for the in and out in port 4, and you should be able to, like if you've got some sliders and things like that, you should be able to do what I'm doing right now and see those numbers in the bottom line change, yeah? So give that a try. So that's the Nano controller. And if I go down to MIDI keys here and I start clicking around, you'll see that port 1, channel 1, The pitch is changing. Each key has its own pitch, right? It's a number, but it actually represents a musical note. The velocity isn't changing because you just set it with this slider. So if I increase the slider, the most we can get is 127. But the thing I really want to point out about this is that when you put in the actors that you need to listen to this, which are the note on watcher that listens for MIDI note on messages, that's when you press the key down, and the control watcher, which listens for control change messages, they come in ready to hear any message of that type on any port, on any MIDI channel. They're basically wide open. So they're going to hear anything or see anything, however you want to think of it. And that's why we just left them set the defaults here, pass the information into this text formatter, which makes the text at the bottom change, and let you see it, right? So this is, I'm sorry, I saw a question. So this is a good way, just this little scene right here is a great way to check that you've got MIDI coming in from your device, right? So I can sit here and press buttons. Oh, by the way, the buttons don't have a value from 0 to 127. They just go 127 or 0. I press it, it's 127 or 0. Okay? So this is a little way to see that. But also good for checking this, as I said before, if you go to the Windows menu and say Show Status, you'll get the status window, and that also shows information coming in. You can see that you get a little green light, you see it on the nano controller line, you see it's a control change message, and you see the control number and the value, right? So anyway, the status window has all that MIDI information for you ready to go, okay? So that's another way to discover. And the other way that you should know if you really want to get super nerdy about it, there's the monitor window. If you open that and you start sending messages, then you get a terminal-like output with all this information. It's probably overkill, but maybe that's useful for you too. So the monitor window, remember, that's for OSC, for MIDI, for TCP IP or serial data. All the kinds of data that go in and out of Isadora can show up in that monitor window, okay? All right, so we've got it so we can hear anything we want to hear, but normally you don't want to get confused because right now, if you look at that message changing at the bottom, if I put the window up a little bit again, you know, it's like you can't actually tell which controller you're pressing because it sees all of them. That's not what you want it to do. You want it to be able to say, I want this controller to do this thing and that controller to do that thing, right? So that's the next scene, is controlling with MIDI, right? So let's take a look at this one in a little more detail. So here we have a note on watcher, so that's looking, it's also still looking for any particular note, and a note off watcher. So that's note on is when you press down, note off is when you let go, right? And so we've got those hooked to some envelope generators, and those are going to the intensity of this movie, yeah? And then down below that we have another control watcher, again looking for any key, right? I'm sorry, any controller, and that the value is directly connected to the intensity input. But let's try the keyboard first. So what will happen is I'm just going to press, it doesn't matter which key I press because everyone is going to work, and I press a key, and if I hold it down, see it's bright, and I let go of the key and the note off comes and it fades out. Press the key, fades in, press the other key, let go, it fades out. Now with my nano controller, I have a direct slider for the other movie that's playing, and I can just fade that in or out like so, right? So here, it's just taking the direct value coming from the controller and going right into the intensity. Now, take note, you may have noticed already, all of these MIDI values go from 0 to 127. That may seem like a kind of a weird choice. Technically, though, under the hood, it's a 7-bit binary number. That's why it's that range. But of course, that's not very useful for a lot of Isadora things where we go from 0 to 100. But remember, if you've seen some of the other Guru sessions, we've talked about this automatic scaling in Isadora. This actor knows that its output range is 0 to 127, and the input range is 0 to 100, and it automatically converts that 0 to 127 into 0 to 100, right? Okay, yeah. So that's, again, we don't know if I do this slider, the first one, it does that movie. I do the second one. I can't tell which slider is going to do what, right? Because we haven't made a decision. But if you go to the next scene now, and here it says, watching for specific MIDI messages. See what we learned, let me go back here for a second. If we watch this controller, let's just watch this. Here's the first slider. You see it's controller 0. And if I do this, it's controller 1. If I do this knob, it's controller 16, okay? So every little knob or slider has its own identifier. Same thing with the pitch. Here, if I do C3, that's 60. D here, that's 62. F is 65. G is 67. By the way, if you would like to see those as note names instead of a number, if you click on the word pitch, and you go to the actors menu, you can say display MIDI note, and it will now show you the actual name, the name of the note, a musical notation, right? So you just go there and you say display MIDI note. And so now you can see that it matches when I'm pressing these keys on the keyboard. It says F3, G3, C4, etc. Okay? All right. Yeah, scaling. You guys were in the chat like scaling, it's bitchin'. All right. So, but what we determined is that, let's even just use this as an example. This is controller 16. That's what we learned. This knob here on the top of the device. You can't see it, but there it is. Yeah? All right. So now when we go to the next scene, what we want to do is we want to set it up for a specific MIDI message, right? And you can read the notes there, but basically all of the watchers except a range, right? You see the port range, 1 to 16, even though we don't have 16 ports. The range of MIDI channels, any MIDI channel, 1 to 16. But here, I've changed the pitch from 60 to, from 0 to 127, which is all possible notes, to the number 60. And I see I made a mistake. My note off watcher should also be 60. Let's all change that. So the note off watcher below the note on watcher here, these should both be 60 for the pitch. So that's, in musical notation, that's middle C or C3. So now look what happens. Since I've set that to 60, I can press all the keys I want here and nothing happens. But if I press C3, now the audio fades in and I let go and it fades out only with that key, right? So, okay, so that's how we make it specific, because now only C3 is going to make those envelope generators go. Same thing with the control watcher. Remember I said that knob was controller 16. So I'm going to go down here and change this to 16. By default it says this, 0 to 127. It's any controller number. But if I set it to 16, now you can see here, if I hold it up, I can go crazy with all of these sliders. Nothing's happening. But if I turn that knob, now I have control over the brightness of that video with that one knob, right? So that's why I wanted to go through this whole thing about ports and channels, and then either controller numbers or note values. And then there's the other element for the note on watcher. We have the velocity. That's how hard you hit the key. If your keyboard measures that, not all of them do. And then on the controller we have the value. That's like, where is the knob or the slider, right? All right, so that's how we can choose which controller or which note we're listening to, and that's how we get specific so that we can have certain things, one slider controlling one thing and another slider controlling another thing, okay? All right, so once you've got that, you basically have what you need in your toolbox to be able to accept note on messages and control messages and start doing stuff with it. Now, I'm not going to go into a ton of examples about, like, we'll have a few, but I'm not going to go into a lot of sophisticated examples. You know, we did that a little bit more with the Guru session on Touch OSC, because in the end, Touch OSC is also doing a lot of sliders and dials and buttons, right? So, oh, good question. How can I make the stage preview window stay when I switch to MIDI keys? I had to do this too because it's not a floating window. If you go to the Isadora preferences and click on the stage tab, you want to uncheck floating stage windows. If you do that, then the stage is a real window. Of course, it goes behind other windows, which is not usually what you want. But in this case, so that you can kind of see what's going on, either you need to move your window, you'll move your window out of the way and uncheck that floating stage windows, right? So that's the way to get it to be able to be visible, because normally floating windows by convention are supposed to disappear when the application goes into the background. And when I click on MIDI keys, it puts Isadora in the background, okay? So that's how to solve that problem. All right, so like I said, like I was just basically saying, I'm not going to get into, I have a few examples, but basically that's what you need to know, because now you have a button that is, it's like a button, right? The MIDI, the note on and the note off. You know, you can start something, you can use it to trigger something. I mean, we'll have a few more examples, and then the controller is that continuous number going up and down so that you could, you know, make things rise up or go down. It could be anything that we've done in many of our tutorials that have to do with a continuous controller. All right, let's go on to the next scene. So to make, I do have something a little bit more fun. So here is I did something in EasyMap. You know, we covered EasyMap, our projection mapping tool, in another tutorial, but I made a few slices here. You can see them all, right? If I go to the output, that's my crazy little abstract thing. I never use EasyMap to actually projection map everything. I just make weird designs with it. Anyway, and what I did was I used the publish function to allow me to control the intensity of each of these slices with my little controller, right? So those are published out here. You see the intensity inputs. And so now what I can do is I can take the slider. So there's one slice. Let me move this up a little bit. So there's a different one. There's one across, like this, like this, like this, like this, right? So I've got all these different sliders, and I can control this. So let me go full screen for a second in Isadora so we can just see this. So here's slider 1, slider 2, and so basically I can just sit here and jam, and I can like make that design. Like I can do it interactively, and I could be listening to some music or some performers, or maybe I have cues in my cue sheet and I just want to be able to ride these levels and change it, right? So basically I have all 7 slices there, and you have each slider can control a different slice, and I can mix that live using this guy, right? So here you just see me in action here, right? So that's a sort of nice example of making use of something like this, where I really have the ability to control each element and do it live, okay? So you can try that if you have a Korg Nano controller, or if you need to discover what your controller numbers are, you would show the status window, right? And remember that last message is your friend, because here you can always see which controller number, num3, num4, num5, and then you could change all of the controller numbers on these control watchers to the ones that match your controller, and then you could run this little patch that I made, right? Okay? So there's sort of a nice example of using this as a kind of jamming tool, right? Where you could be watching the performance, bringing stuff in or out, and controlling it in that way. Here's the same thing with notes. This is a much simpler example. So we only have a switch, right? There's just, boom, note on. So all that I did was I assigned it to the white notes on the keyboard from C3 to B3. And if I hit C3, it does that one, and D3 like this. So now if I kind of move quickly here, it would be much cooler if I had a real keyboard and I could just play it with my fingers, right? But I'll just do this. And so I'm triggering those envelope generators. C3 is the first one, D3 is the second one, E3 is the third one, and so on. And so by doing that, you could almost imagine giving this to a musician and having them play a composition, and an entire light show like you saw at the beginning, where you can see where I'm headed with this because you saw what I did at the very beginning, could be controlled with these keys, right? So that's another example, because if we have the trigger, that's always the thing. You have that, just that sort of, I hit the key, now what do? We often use the envelope generator to convert that impulse into a nice smooth something that we can, for instance here, start bright and have it fade out to black, right? So you can try that and play around with my little abstract crazy design. All right, so those are some examples of getting control, using the control watcher to get controller information, and the note on watcher to get note on information, and of course the note off watcher too, right? Let's go into the next scene. And so now we're going to move into sending MIDI, right? So this is where you need to make sure, let's just check it here to make sure I did it right. So I've got Simple Synth as my port 1 output, right? And there's Simple Synth. And I hope that some of that's working for you. Again, on Windows, it should be the GS Wavetable synthesizer, the built-in thing. These aren't the greatest sounding synthesizers. If you really wanted to use this, you could either buy a piece of software that implements this and has nicer sounds, or you could get a physical synthesizer that has it, which has probably even nicer sounds maybe. But for right now, we're going to use this piece of software to be our little synthesizer. So, and now if you try it, if you've got those things, if you've got Simple Synth, by the way, MIDI source on Simple Synth needs to be Simple Synth virtual input. It's like a tongue twister. Simple Synth virtual input. Say that 40 times fast. That's important because otherwise it's not going to work, right? Okay, so hopefully if you're like me and you pressed 1, 2, and 3, you will hear notes playing. You will hear notes playing on the Simple Synth or the GS Wavetable synthesizer. Give me some confirmation in the chat if that's working for you. But let's look at this actor, the send note actor, while you're checking that, letting me know. So we've got the same information, but no ranges here. We have to send it to port 1 because that's where Simple Synth is. If we send it to port 4, it would go to the nano controller, which isn't going to help us, right? So you've got to send it to the right cable or port to get it to the device or program you need it to go to. The MIDI channel here, we're just using one MIDI channel, the first one, so they're all the same, channel 1. And then the pitch, of course, determines which musical pitch that we play. 60 again is middle C, 62 is D3. Again, to remind you, if you click on the word pitch, if you'd like to see those as actual notes, you can Actors menu, display, MIDI note, and it will show you the name of the note there, right? It walks, it talks, it's working. Okay, awesome, okay. Right? So now I just turned my actual keys on Isadora into a simple, super simple synthesizer. Note that there's no note off to worry about, because normally if you didn't send a note off, the note would sound forever. You need the note off. That means stop playing, right? But this actor does it for you if the duration is not 0. So here the duration is 1 second. So every time you trigger it, you get a note that lasts 1 second, and then it automatically sends the note off for you, yeah? And there's a nice feature here too, is this off input. If you're feeding numbers into the pitch input and triggering them, if you have this off input turned on, it automatically stops the previous note as soon as the new note is triggered, so that you don't have any overlap, right? That's also a convenience if you're generating some notes, which you'll see how to do in a moment, okay? So that's it, little keyboard. But we also have the possibility of playing some different sounds. This is part of the general MIDI standard. There's a whole set of 127 instruments that every general MIDI synthesizer needs to have, right? So if you look down there, you see that Simple Synth says piano 1 square wave fingered bass. Now on Windows you don't have the benefit of seeing what they say, but it's handy here on Mac OS, because watch what happens when I hit letter S. Let's watch down here. I'm going to hit, I just zoom in. Letter S, ooh, it changed to a harp. Letter D, a synth bass 1, and letter F, synth brass 1. Okay, so how did that happen? That's using another actor, another MIDI message called program change. When you send a program change to a synthesizer, if it has a bunch of programs, it will load whichever one you ask. So here we've got program 0, that's this one, that's letter A. Program 46, that's the harp, that's letter S, and you can see the rest of them there. So where did I get that list? There's actually, I thought I put a URL somewhere. Ooh, maybe it was in another scene. But if you just search Wikipedia for General MIDI standard or whatever, you can see the list of all the different instruments that are built into these General MIDI synthesizers. But so the main point is here, we are changing this on channel 1, because notice if I hit letter A, S, D, F, you see it changing there, right? But note, look what happens if I change briefly. You don't need to do this, but I'm going to change all of these to channel 2 instead of channel 1, right? Now when I hit A, S, D, F, the second one is changing. That's where our MIDI channels come in, right? Because the MIDI channel determines how I address the different instruments inside of the one device. So you can sort of see that in action with what I just did, right? Okay, so that's the program change message. That's probably not going to be useful if you're not actually working with a MIDI instrument, because the thing about the note on and the controller messages, there is lots of software that use those that have nothing to do with notes. So for instance, I can even reprogram this so that these buttons over here don't send controller messages, they send MIDI note on and note off messages. That's possible using their editor. But and also, like for instance, going all the way back a million years, you know, I invented this device called MIDI Dancer in 1989 that could measure the movement of a dancer's body, and it actually had also MIDI input, and it used a message called a monophonic controller, monophonic pressure message to send the position of the limbs. Doesn't matter, but the point is that those MIDI channels really really matter when you've got all this data coming in. Oh, sorry, lost my train of thought. The thing I was trying to say was that the data may not have anything to do with musical instruments, even though it's called Musical Instrument Digital Interface. That's what MIDI means, right? Okay, so keep in mind there's lots of devices for which MIDI can be useful. Like for instance, I think there's a brainwave measuring device you put on your head. It measures your brain waves, and it has the possibility also to send a stream of MIDI controller messages as measuring your brain waves. So it doesn't have to have anything to do with music. But in the case of the program change message, probably the only thing you'll ever use that with is the actual musical synthesizer. Okay, so that's some basics about sending MIDI. Here's something a little more fun. Now I hope that you can hear the notes. I'm sorry the beginning was a little bit soft. But here is a random melody maker, right? Let's take a look at this patch and understand it a little bit better. So here's a pulse generator going at 1 cycle per second, so 1 trigger per second, going into a random number generator, which is generating a number from 0 to 100, and then that's going into the select input of this table actor, right? The table has 8 values in it. I set that up, and these are musical pitches that I chose. It's kind of a pentatonic scale, basically, but you don't need to know that. It's some numbers that I chose that sounded good to me, and so it's just randomly choosing these notes using the random. And remember, how does that 0 to 100 become 1 to 8? Automatic scaling. Everybody in the chat say it, automatic scaling, right? So we've got the value out going into the select input, choosing the random number, and then choosing the random slot, let's say, and then that number is sent out over here, setting the pitch and the trigger to get it to send that note. And we can actually use this quiet feature now. and make the duration actually longer, because the quiet feature ensures that the notes don't last too long. So you want to have a longer duration because every new note makes the previous note stop. Okay, so we've got the piano playing this random melody. Automatic scaling, thank you, Bill. All right, but now notice this part is not hooked up. I've got the trigger output going to a random actor. That's going to a table that has these rates, 0.25 hertz, 0.5, 1, 2, and 4 hertz, right? Why did I make it those ratios? They're all actually multiples of each other, because that's sort of like a whole note, a half note, a quarter note, an eighth note, a 16th note, right? We will kind of get this musical feel. So this random generator chooses one of these rates to start giving the music not just this like ba ba ba, always the same, but to give it a little more life. And we're going to connect that, and you should try this too, from the value out to the frequency input of the first pulse generator. It's hitting some slow ones. Let's have hope for a fast bit. There. Yeah? Let's make it even more likely. I'm going to add one more thing here. It's not doing fast ones enough. I want to have more. There. By adding another entry, adding 6 values, and adding another 4 hertz one, the probability of getting a faster one is higher. Okay? So there it is, generating those random melodies. And we've got the same thing here, but now with kind of a bass sound. Let's go in and change the duration to 3 seconds and use that quiet feature. And we'll go down here, set this to 6, add another 4, and now, oh Siri. Okay, so little automatic music making machine, right? This is called, in highfalutin circles, we call that stochastic music generation, yeah? But anyway, it's sort of see here that we can use this table of notes and send them using the send note actor, and we can create a melody, right? And by the way, this technique, you could use this for a lot of different things, this notion of generating from a table so that you get certain values and that you randomly select from the table. That's also something that you can make use of, okay? So that's a little random melody maker using our simple synthesizer. And now we come to what we saw at the beginning. You know, Claude Debussy is the reason I'm here, because at 15 years old I listened to La Mer, and there's a particular section in that music that actually made me cry, and that's when I decided I was going to be an artist, honestly. And so I love Debussy, and I always love using his music. So here's a little standard MIDI file recording of Debussy. What in the world is a standard MIDI file? Well, I'm telling you, this is really super old school, all right? Way back in the day, you know, MIDI was invented in 1985, right? They also invented, to go along with MIDI, something called a standard MIDI file, a way of having a list of MIDI notes inside of a file that you could use to play it. Isadora has used those or imported those since the beginning. Probably very few people use them, but actually cool for a lot of different reasons, and I want to show a few examples. But let's look at this most sophisticated one I did. I've got the Debussy Clair de Lune MIDI file. That's MIDI file number 1, and I'm using the MIDI player. As you can see, it looks a little bit like a sound player or a movie player to a certain extent. It's got, but instead of playing a sound or a movie, it plays a standard MIDI file. It's got a port, it's got a channel override. So here, if you don't type anything, you say 0, it uses the MIDI channels that are in the MIDI file, yeah? It's got a start and a stop, a tempo, the speed, right? Something called velocity modulation, we'll see that in a second. Play start and play length, just like the movie player has, so you can actually play short snippets of this file, and then whether or not you have the loop enabled turned on, so it would loop, right? So what I've done though is something kind of bizarre. I'm going to need my MIDI setup. So I've set this up so that we're going to play that standard MIDI file. We're going to play two copies of the same file. One is going to the synthesizer so you can hear it, and the other one is going to the virtual MIDI output. And then what we're going to do, we're going to bring that back into Isadora and use it to trigger something in Isadora. Now, what I need you to understand is that I'm doing that because it was easy for me to set up and you can try it. But you can imagine, you're going to see at the very end of this, I have a little example with Ableton, a software many people use, obviously, to do music, yeah, where the MIDI signals are going to come from Ableton into Isadora, and we'll use them. So if you're using another piece of software like Ableton or some other sequencing program, all of that MIDI information can go into Isadora, and you can use that to trigger stuff, right? So this is a way of getting these systems to communicate with each other, and MIDI is often a convenient way to do it. Okay, so, excuse me. Notice how I've got this set up. This is the part that I said was weird before in Mac OS. I've got Isadora Virtual out as an input. That seems crazy, doesn't it? But for some reason, that's the way Mac OS works. If you want to route the MIDI back into itself, you take the output and use it as an input. Sounds wacky, I know, but that's how it works. So that's why we got Isadora Virtual out for both of these. That port 2 is how I'm going to get the data back in. Now on Windows, we have to do it differently because remember the loopback port was port number 1. And so this is really important in this green background comment. It says on Mac OS, this value 1 should be set to 2. On Windows, it needs to be set from 1. That's the port number that we're going to get the looped MIDI, yeah? So basically, when I play these files, you're going to hear them, but then you see all of these user actors, right? Well, what are those? Well, I sat there with the monitor window earlier and played this music, and I looked at every pitch that was in the music. And I made a user actor that very simply, I'm not going to explain the whole thing, but basically when you come into the scene, it makes a random sized rectangle. It uses a bunch of random actors here and a random color. So that's always going to be different in each user actor because it uses a random number, right? And then I've got this pitch coming in here. So when you see that pitch, it's going to trigger this envelope generator, and you're going to see the note play. Like here, I can try it down here. Maybe. Oh, it's on the wrong port. No, I can't actually. But anyway, when middle C comes into this one, it's going to play this thing. It's going to look like this. Like this. You see it briefly, it's there. Yeah? Okay. So, excuse me again. Each one of these user actors is for a different pitch that is in the piece. So now, if I start playing that standard MIDI file, you should, and I'll try and even put the microphone near it so you can hear it, you should be able. Okay, hopefully I'm not making too much noise with the mic there. So basically, that could be a live pianist, right, with a MIDI keyboard, or maybe you have a wonderful like Disclavier, the Yamaha piano that's a real piano that also has MIDI, right? So you could be taking that from any MIDI instrument, from a live player, and generating that kind of output, right? So it's one of the interesting possibilities with MIDI because it's so easy to get these notes and to link them to things. You can create a visual piece of artwork that responds to MIDI in real time and is a generative piece that's absolutely locked to what the performer is making. It's a pretty nice idea to think about, yeah? So this little patch explains that, but the looping back is a little bit crazy and harder to understand. It would be better in a way if you just had a MIDI keyboard. You could set this port number here, by the way, to the same port that you have your real MIDI keyboard on, and you could just play, and if you hit some of those notes, you'll see the squares appear. Also, one thing that was nice about this, Oh, I should have let it play. The velocity, let's look at that for a second. The velocity here, which is stored in the MIDI file, it gets a little bit louder as the piece goes on. That's being used to control how high the envelope generator goes, right? So in fact, as you play louder, the squares are brighter, yeah? So as it gets as you go into it, you'll see that the velocity is controlling that. I see that Mark says that you're not getting the visuals on Windows. If you look at this Win MIDI setup, that picture is with the file that you have, and I'll open it for you. This is what it should look like for you in terms of the setup. Loop MIDI needs to be set up. We went through that at the beginning, right? And Microsoft GS Wavetable Synth. Port 2, you need Loop MIDI as an output, yeah? Okay? Because we send the MIDI out of Loop MIDI port on port 2, and then we take it back in on port 1. So for it to work on Windows, you also need to make sure, you need to make sure to set this value 1 input here. You need to set this to 1 on Windows for this patch to work. I don't know if that will help you. If not, let's refer in the forum. We'll try and help you out later and get it working. But hopefully, is it working for other people? You can let me know. Give me a sign. Give me a sign in there if it actually works for you, yeah? Okay. That's wacky and bizarre. That's me, wacky and bizarre. I think take that as a big compliment. Ah, fixed it. Yay. All right, here we go. Next patch. This one is really funny. You can't do this if you don't have the Korg. And I hope, because it's not very bright, I hope that you can see it. But let's see if I hold it back. Can you see the lights going? Yeah? So basically, I am sending MIDI messages to the Korg. I am sending controller messages to turn the lights behind the buttons on and off. Okay? So here, because this device, if you set it up properly, will accept a controller message for each of those buttons to turn the light on or off. Okay? So I made this little chase, basically. I wish I could turn the lights out so you could just see the lights going. But anyway, I think you can kind of see it in the chat there, yeah? Or I mean in the video. So I'm not going to go through a lot of details about how that works. There's kind of some icky math in there to make it easy for me. I don't think. But the only thing you need to understand is that the one send control here is sending the value 0. That turns the light off. And this is sending the value 127. That turns the light on. Notice that I put here in a picture for you. This doesn't work. If you happen to have the Korg Nano Controller 2, and it has to be number 2, you can set this up to receive those messages, which it does not do by default. You have to get their free little editor and go in and change this LED mode to external. Just if you all are burning to try that because you have it, you have to go get their editor and change that setting. I was confused for about 20 minutes sending all these messages, and it didn't work until I found that, right? So maybe I see that even our dear Lucas is saying that his buttons aren't lighting up, but maybe that's why, because he hasn't set that external setting. All right, so that's just a little fun thing. So it's just using controllers for another purpose. I just did it for another example of what's possible, right? Here's another example of using a MIDI file in a very simple way. So here, I've got a little short snippet. Oh, well, no, I'm going back to, that's the Clair de Lune, actually. If we hit start, it plays the Clair de Lune. If I hit S, it stops, right? So that's like what we did already. You've already seen that, actually. But in the next little scene, we have it where I've got these program change messages here. That's just to make sure that I have the sounds that I selected. There's the URL. See the list of general MIDI sounds there's the URL to go see them. And I've got these keyboard watchers, each triggering a little snippet of MIDI, right? So here, if I do number 1, number 2, 3. One, 2, 3, 2, 2, 2, 2, 1, 3. All right? So what we've done here is we've taken the numbers 1, 2, and 3, which could be also a note on message from the keyboard. I could have used that too. But now that single trigger becomes an actual little musical phrase, right? And this is a way when you're working with performers, if you're measuring, for instance, especially dancers or movers or people like that, that you want different body motions to trigger a little snippet of a composition. You could think of it this way, and the MIDI files work. And the thing that's beautiful about the MIDI files is that you can modulate their velocity. Now, the MIDI files have velocity stored in them, so if you want to do da 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 da, you know, accents like that, that's possible, right? But you'll notice this thing I mentioned earlier, the velocity modulation. This allows you to increase or decrease the stored velocity to make basically it get louder or softer if the MIDI sounds are responding to velocity. Yeah, they don't always do, probably mostly these days they do, but sometimes they don't. So now watch what happens if I start playing these little snippets. But if I go turn this gate on, you'll see that as it's playing, sometimes it's really soft. See that? That's just the wave generator doing that. But imagine that you were measuring, if you were measuring the flick of a wrist, and if it was like this, it was soft, and the little phrase was da-da-dee-da-da-da, and you do like this, and it's da-da-dee-da-da-da-da, like that. Oh, I'm maxing out the thing. I hope I didn't distort. Okay, so so this idea that you can use these standard MIDI files in this way, if you have a nice synthesizer or you're working with a composer that works with MIDI synthesizers or software that accepts MIDI notes for the synthesizers, you could be controlling this, right? So that's pretty interesting, and it's a technique that I used a lot in the early days of the MIDI dancer system, to be able to give the dancer ability to make a more complex composition from little movements of their body. Yeah? Okay? Any questions? Are we building up any questions? I should just check. I'm so happy Mark got it working. Everyone's having a good time there. The MIDI sprout. I don't know what that is, Eva. I'm going to have to ask about that later. I saw something go by about the MIDI sprout. All right. Put your questions in the chat there if you need it. Let's go on to the next topic here. So we're actually going to be done pretty soon. Amazing. It could be the shortest Guru session ever. But I wanted to do something with Ableton because that's a question that comes up in the forum a lot. Yeah, so I downloaded the trial because I don't actually have Ableton. I use something called Professional Composer. I'm sorry, no, I forget what it's called now. Anyway, I use something from a company called Mark of the Unicorn. That's my sequencer. But let me open this demo project I made in Ableton. Or I guess I have to open Ableton first. So here's Ableton Live, trial, yes. Okay, and now I say open, I hope. Oh, a spinning ball of something. So, yes, Ableton. Someone's happy about that. I don't know, I've got a spinning ball there. I'm not too sure it's gonna work. Let me just check that the stream is actually still working at this moment in time. Yeah. Oh, I don't know. This isn't looking too positive here. I better... I guess I better try closing it and see if I can try again. I hope this works. I'd like to show it to you. Okay. Oh, same thing. Well, that may put a wrinkle in my ability to show you anything. Who knew that it was gonna not boot up again? I did this at the very last minute. That's why you don't even have this scene in there. Let's see. I can't let me see if I can double click the file. I'll try one more time. Sorry for the problems. Maybe I can just drag the stuff in there and make it work. But let's see here if I... Okay, hooray. Okay, double clicking on the file worked. All right. So, here we go. So here's this little, oh no, it's spinning ball of death again. Nope, I'm afraid it's not going to work, folks. I'm so sorry that I can't do that. I don't know what's happening. I guess maybe because it's the trial. I'm not really sure. I'll let it spin for a little bit longer in case we can do it. But let me tell you what the basic, since someone, Ziggy was excited about that, let me tell you the basics. Yes, I know it's not my... Oh! Amazing. Okay. I guess I was just too impatient. There it is. Okay. Much louder than the other track. Okay. So here's Ableton, yeah? I imported these same little snippets. It's not the best piece of music, so forgive me for that, but it's just an example. But here they are in Ableton. So those are my standard MIDI files, the same ones we were playing before. I found some groovy instruments there that I put into Ableton. So this is what it sounds like if I play it. Yeah? Okay. So the first thing I want to show you, you know, one of the overlooked powers of MIDI is this great timing system that you have when you have a sequencer program. So one of the messages that you can listen for is called our real-time messages. And the ones that I used in this case are the start message and the stop message. So basically, when you're using a program like Ableton or another sequencer program, and you have to set it up to send those out. I'll show you how to do it in Ableton in just a second. But it sends the start when you hit the play button, and it hits stop when you stop it, right? So now what I did is just a simple example, and I don't know, hopefully we can see all of this at the same time. I've got the real-time watcher hooked up here. The start message triggers a 1, which makes the speed of this movie player 1, and the stop message triggers a 0, which makes the speed of the movie player 0, right? So basically, every time we start and stop Ableton, the movie should start and stop. So let's try that. So here we go. Stop. Stop, right? So this is one of the things that becomes possible, is that you can actually sense when the sequencer is starting and stopping, and you can use that information to start and stop things in Isadora to synchronize them. So hold on, I'm just going to go back for some quick questions here. Is the Korg Nano Control 2 your top tip for a simple MIDI controller for knobs? Yes, I think it's a great little unit. It's really inexpensive. It really does the job. It's easy to carry around. I like it. I mean, there also may be stuff you can get going on your iPad. You know, the Touch OSC also sends MIDI as well as OSC. You can use it as a MIDI controller too. So if you have a phone or an iPad, that's also nice, right? Or an Android device. So anyway, going back to Ableton here. So we can use that timing information to start and stop things in Isadora. There are even more options for that. If you go to the live preferences, yeah, which is now I'm going to show you how I got it to send that. If we go here to this link MIDI, this is how you set up your MIDI inputs and output, right? So look here, output Isadora virtual in. So Isadora virtual in, let's look at Isadora. That's port 5. I didn't have you do that because I uploaded the files. I did it at the very last minute. So I've got port 5 on Isadora set to Isadora virtual in. And over here in Ableton, you see the same list of objects that we have. We have these inputs and these outputs. But I've chosen in the sync column, the sync is where you send that data, right? Where it's the start and the stop and all the different stuff like that. That's turned on for Isadora virtual in. Right? And the track output is also turned on. That's how you can send MIDI notes from Ableton to Isadora, right? I also have the output turned on for Simple Synth, but I actually did that before I got the Ableton sounds, which sound better, obviously. So I'm going to turn that off, right? So basically, I just chose the Isadora virtual in, turned the track and the sync on, and now I can send data from Ableton over to Isadora, not only the musical notes, but these control things, the start and stop messages as well, right? Okay. There is somewhere in here, I didn't have time to look it up. I'll have to put this note on the forum. You can also send time code. You can send MIDI time code. And if you do that, you can receive that time code and you can do things based on where you are in the track that way. That's what, you know, some people don't know what this is down here. That's if you're receiving MIDI time code, that time code will appear here and you can use the MTC compare and the MTC reader to read that time code, and then you can do like a comparison and say, if it gets to this time code, do this. Sorry that I didn't find it. If someone knows where that setting is in Ableton, tell me and I will do it before we finish. But let's look at the other part of the patch now, because I'm sending this MIDI track here in Ableton, number 4. That's going to the Isadora Virtual In. I chose it here in the menu, right? So that is going to a note on watcher. Oh, and I did a note off watcher by accident. Well, that's weird. Better fix that. So you can fix that too, because I made a mistake. Oh no. So you need the trigger output to go to the add object input of this particle system, and then you also need it to go into the random actor here. So it should look like this. Now note on trigger goes down to add object, trigger goes to random, and now it should be good to go. And so now if I play the track in Ableton, make this a bit smaller. Oh, except I can't see number 4. Maybe if I make it a bit less tall, I can do it. Yeah, so now if I hit play, so what you can see if I zoom in, let me solo the track that we're doing here. Wrong one, this one I guess. So every note, because these track 3 and 4 are triggering that note on watcher. See the trigger going there? And every time you get a trigger, it generates a particle using this particle system that travels. Yeah? So I'm using that information from the notes to do another generative system. Yeah? So now we put it all together by unmuting those. So not an amazing piece of art, but an example of how you can easily take the notes coming from Ableton and use them to trigger different things. Now see, the thing is, I've got this set to channel 1, but if I set that to had another MIDI track and set it to channel 2, then I could do a second one and have it generating its own thing, right? So that's some basics, and that's just one example, because really every music sequencer program, whether it's Ableton or Digital Performer, which I use, or whatever, is probably going to have this virtual MIDI connection option, and it's also probably going to have the sync information, and you can use that to transmit those MIDI notes, and then they become a source of generating visual imagery or just controlling visual imagery. You can also just send a note at a specific moment and use it as a trigger to fade in a movie or to jump to the next scene, for instance, right? All of that is possible. So we're coming to the end. That was my last scene. So I hope that that is answering some questions, but I actually wanted to leave some room for questions because I figured there might be some about how do you do this or that, because there's a lot of possibilities here, and I just wanted to show like some of what you could do and get your brains cooking about that. If MIDI is important, or if it becomes more important, we could come back and do a more advanced session. But this one was designed to help people who maybe have never seen it before to see what the possibilities are. So let me look at some questions. What do you think about MIDI 2.0? Any chance we'll get support for it in the future? Well, if Mac OS or Windows, Microsoft, puts it in the operating system, I would be more than happy to add it. But as far as I know, I have not seen any announcements about that. So it's going to be a while before MIDI 2.0 gets to us, yeah? Um, uh, Ziggy says, anything I missed to get Ableton to play? I don't know. Um, I'm not sure what you mean by that question. I really, I've never even cracked open Ableton before. I've never done this. So I was learning it today too. So I'm not an expert. Someone else maybe, I don't know if Sculpture's here, because Sculpture's our total Ableton man. He's DJing every Friday or something during the coronavirus, like doing his thing. So if he's here, he could answer it. But if not, ask in the forum and let's see if we can get him to answer your question, okay? Any tips on how to get sysx messages inside Isadora? For output, we have an actor. For input, we don't. Yeah, yeah, it's a limitation. I don't have an answer for you, Jurian. I guess that I felt like, oh well. Just was trying to remember if there was something. No, we don't have an answer for that. I mean, it's something that would have to be added, and part of it is like the whole parsing thing. I guess it's kind of like the issues there, the difficulty or complexity of the text parser or the serial in watcher, those actors, right? So I don't have a good answer for you, unfortunately. Looking at more questions. What'd you get? Okay, let's add to that. I set the press in Ableton, no connection yet. Well, I'm sorry, it's kind of hard for me to debug it from here, Ziggy, but maybe go through and take a look at what I did, and let's see. If not, we can try. There's a, we saw it earlier today. Sculpture has an online tutorial that you can just search for on YouTube. It's on his page where he shows you how to do this. So I would go take a look at it. I think that maybe if you take a second look and see him do it, because he's much more of an expert than me, you'll probably get it working, okay? Let's see. All right, that's it for the questions. So that's where we got to today. We had some MIDI going in and out. I hope that was informative and interesting. And if you have any further questions that go beyond what we could do here today, go put them in the forum topic for this session, and we'll try and answer them. And if you liked what you heard today, make some comments down in the comment fields. Join us on all our social media stuff. And mostly, I just hope that you have a really nice, relaxing weekend and that you're able to get outside and somehow enjoy a greater sense of the world safely. Oh, last question. Thanks so much for today's. Say something about the state of the world and the WC, seeing you all in the chat. Oh, well, yeah, it's such a difficult time for so many people, and I'm not going to go a long ways into this. But my well wishes for you aside, I also hope that you're finding a way to expand yourself and into how we can all be the same. Let me just say it that way. Good point, Andy. You're really great at remembering things like that, reminding me. So, all right, that's it for today. That's a final thought. Let's go out. Let's be proactive. Let's really take care of each other like crazy, yeah? And let's learn how to do MIDI. Make something cool and let us know about it on the forum. I hope you have a super good weekend. Protest, sit and relax, whatever works for you. Be out there and be well. All right, see you later.